to fourth grade place value of whole numbers. Today we're going to focus on place value relationships.
My name is Daryl Frost, and I'm going to be co-facilitating with my training partner here. I'm a K-5 district math coach.
I'm Shanna Uwe. I'm also district K-5 math coach. Welcome.
We're actually going to engage you in a task. We're going to ask you to pause the video and complete the task either by yourself or with a team partner.
You're going to scan the QR code or use the link on the slide. And what you're going to do is sort the task into 3 categories based on what strategies you think the kids should use to solve: concrete, representational, or abstract. We'll see you soon. So now we're going to look at the progression with BEST, focusing on place value of whole numbers, specifically place value relationships. So looking at the progression with BEST, here's what they have in 3rd grade, 4th grade, which we will focus on, and 5th grade. Pause the video and take some time to kind of read through this slide. Welcome back.
So interesting here, I read through that progression with BEST, with place value relationships. I'm seeing that in 4th grade now, and this would be a change from maths to BEST, correct me if I'm wrong, but now we're having to think about not just 10 times greater, but 10 times less, or thinking about division.
Yes, so we're multiplying by 10 and dividing by 10 to look at those relationships. And then in 5th grade, it comes back in multiplying by 100 and dividing by 100 and so on.
Stay tuned for that.
So when we begin to represent place value relationships, we want to begin with base 10 blocks. They truly show the 10 times greater and 10 times less relationship between digits. Then we move to representational, more pictorial, with the place value disc and the place value chart to look at those relationships.
You know, Shanna, I just had an aha moment here. Many times I've seen in the entry point of view with building that base 10 understanding of 10 times greater, 10 times less with the place value discs. But really, we need to start with the base 10 blocks, because you can see that comparative reasoning of 10 times greater, 10 times less, and then move to the place value disc.
Exactly, Daryl. And that means that we need to start with numbers less than 1,000 to do that representation, and then we can extend it with the larger amounts whenever we get into the place value disc and place value chart. So whenever we begin to represent these place value relationships with base 10 blocks, it's really important just to start with a hundreds flat, a tens rod, and a unit cube, and just explore the 10 times greater relationship.
So if you look there to the left at the bottom where you see that text in blue in quotes, that language then is what we want 4th graders to actually start seeing and using, and you want to hear that math chat, if you will, as they're building that relationship between those tools, that flat, that rod, and that small cube there, saying that the rod is 10 times greater than the cube, because a lot of students will say it's 9 more, but that's not the context of this and building that comparative reasoning. It's 10 times greater, so that they're seeing it as multiplication.
Exactly, and some kids might actually need to take 10 cubes and put it on top of the rod to see that 10 times greater relationship. Now looking in the opposite direction, now we're looking at 10 times less, or dividing by 10, which is new to 4th grade.
So if you take a look there at those base 10 blocks, and then at the text in blue and quotes, 10 is 10 times less than 100. The students can see that, and they may actually have to build on top of that flat to show 10 rods, and with each rod saying 1 times less than 100, 2 times less than 100, 3 times less than 100. So they're seeing that relationship, and the same thing can happen between the cube and the rod there. And also, once the student is able to make that relationship and use that language of 10 times less, for the example there, 10 is 10 times less than 100, then have them translate that to what in an equation.
And this is so important because a lot of times once we get to that division, we tend to go a little more abstract in our instruction, but we really want to make sure we're still starting with these concrete tools of base 10 blocks so that they see the relationship.
Totally.
Spent time with just one flat, one rod, and one unit, you can increase the digits. So down there, you can see that the number 333 is represented.
So I think, Shanna, what you did here is very important with that model there. If I'm looking at it correctly, that actually represents 333. And what I like about that is that it's the same digit in each of those place value positions so that students can begin to see that relationship either to the left or to the right, where they're multiplying by 10 or they're dividing by 10. So in this case, 3 ones, we would want a student to be able to say and make sense of the fact that 3 ones is 10 times less than 3 tens.
Correct. Or 3 tens are 10 times less than 3 hundreds, and really visualizing those representations using those base 10 blocks.
And then thinking about an equation that matches that language.
Continue to use those models to start looking for those patterns with the place value relationships. In this model, you can see that students are noticing when moving from right to left, the value is increasing 10 times greater, or we're multiplying by 10. But whenever we go the opposite direction and go to the right, the value is 10 times less, or dividing by 10.
So I think you hit on something very important, that even with something as abstract as developing patterns, we still need to be using those base 10 models for students to develop and see that pattern, that every time they move, you know, to the left or the right or the adjacent place value, it's either going to be times 10 or divide by 10.
Definitely. We want them to understand and be able to visualize why those patterns work. Students have had a lot of time to explore and understand the place value relationships between the adjacent place values right next to them. With 10 times greater or 10 times less, we can move into greater amounts past 1,000. So such as this task right here.
And so you see here, now I can start using those place value discs because they have that proportional reasoning of that proportional comparison, if you will, of 10 times greater, 10 times less. I can use place value discs in conjunction with a place value chart, or even something more abstractly, like you're seeing there, 77,000. And I can start thinking about, 7,000 times 10 is 70,000, and so forth, and start comparing digits.
And it's really important once we get to that abstract to know some students may still need to go backwards and represent it with the place value disc or place value chart, or even going back to base 10 blocks.
Good point, Shanna.
Summarize all the different strategies that we discussed with place value relationships. We're starting with the concrete, such as base 10 blocks. Then we're moving to representational thinking, place value chart, place value disc, and then abstract thinking would be the last one.
So it's really important, many students may come in at that abstract thinking island, if you will, but it's important for them to be able to create models that represent those equations and show that multiplicative comparison of 10 times greater, 10 times less. So students may enter at any of these islands, but they need to be able to, those bridges you see there are created or built by students making connections between all three islands.
And knowing that if I'm stuck at the abstract thinking and I need to go back to a different island to build my understanding to make a stronger bridge, I can do that. Now looking back at our original task where you guys sorted based on what strategies you thought students would use to solve the task, let's kind of compare what we have here to what you did originally. So for concrete, I had these tasks right here, really focus on that base 10 model. For representational, bringing in those place value discs or place value charts, and then abstract, go into those equations and the solving with just the numbers.
And so notice that, you may have some differences here, but this is along a continuum. And so there may be, certainly different tasks you could justify being on different islands, if you will, being each concrete representational abstract being a different island. So just know that it's on a continuum, and that the idea here is that you are beginning with taking students where they are and where they need to be, and being able to make connections across all three of those islands.
So take a minute to pause this video and then check your work with what we have on the slide. Thank you for joining us for the first Math Dive in 5 for 4th grade, place value of whole numbers, place value relationships. We hope you enjoyed it and got a lot out of it, and we look forward to seeing you at future Math Dive in 5 videos.
Bye.
Bye.